Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the LPI and to this Learning Live digital event presented by Explorance. It's my pleasure to welcome so many L&D professionals calling into today's Learning Live digital event. My name is Scott Shepherd. I am the Learning and Development Manager here at the LPI and will be your host up until the hour. So if you have just joined us, a very good afternoon. If you just pop your name, where you're calling from, into the chat area. Always great to see where our L&D professionals are calling in from today. So just a little bit of housekeeping, if I can just ask you to remain on mute throughout today's event so that our expert panel can give us their undivided attention during today's event. Our panel will be taking questions throughout, so please utilise the chat area and pose those questions as we go through today's event. So I can see lots of people just joining in. Marcella calling in from Argentina, so lovely to have you with us. Hayley's calling in from a sunny Surrey. Zenli calling in from Harrogate, lovely to have you. And I can just see lots of people just joining in. Claire's calling in from Imparta in the UK, lovely to have you with us. And good afternoon, Chris calling in from Warwick Conferences. Mark's calling in from Gloucestershire, and Colin also calling in from the Kent and Fire and Rescue in sunny Kent. Yes, I think most of the UK today is experiencing some sunny conditions, which is very much needed and spring-like today. So Vicky's calling in from Woking, lovely to have you with us. And Yolandi, hi there, currently in France, but normally in Oxfordshire. So thank you for taking the time and calling into this Learning Live digital event today. Caroline's calling in from Berkshire, lovely to have you with us. Lots of people coming into the event right now. Hi Diana, calling in from Essex, lovely to have you with us. And Michelle's calling in from Berlin. So lovely to have you all with us today. And we're going to be joined by our expert panel at 1 o'clock. We're going to be joined by Stephanie Johnson, Manager of Consulting Delivery at Explorance, and Peter Clarke, Head of Learning Performance and Innovation at SJP. So our expert panel, our webinar today, from zero to storytelling, how St. James Place uses learner feedback to drive their digital transformation. So in late 2020, St. James Place was seeking to find a way to demonstrate the value of their L&D programs to the organisation as a whole. Their journey started by implementing Explorance Metrics that matter as a scalable way to collect meaningful feedback on the application and impact of their work. So if we just fast forward now to 2023, SJP won the Gold Award for People Development Programme of the Year in the private sector and the Silver Award for their digital learning transformation. Neither of these awards would have been possible without the L&D strategy that has been put into place that puts measurement at the heart of design, delivery and refinement. So we're going to be joined by our expert panel where they will be discussing how they've used this learner feedback to drive their digital transformation. So you're in for a great session this afternoon. As are all Learning Live digital events, they are free to attend, and you can find previous recordings on the website on some truly inspiring and innovative sessions from L&D professionals from around the world. As we know, L&D budgets are often quite tight, so that's why we've made all Learning Live digital online sessions completely free to attend. So just pick a session from our calendar and register. It's as easy as that. So we're not limiting you to a time window. Learning Live digital sessions are scheduled all year round, meaning that you can dip in and out whenever you wish. So never miss a session. And all Learning Live online sessions are recorded, and previous recordings are available from the past Learning Live digital events that have happened here at the LPI. And those previous recordings are only available to members of the LPI. So if you're not already a member of the LPI, we've got some great benefits. We've tripled the number of member benefits, added a new member dashboard, including an events management service, built in free access to LPI Learn, our digital academy for L&D professionals. And we've got many discounts which you can take advantage of. And what's more, we're donating 10% of all new membership fees to the Trussell Trust to help people struggling to put food on the table. So if you work in L&D, the LPI is here to help, and where you can join the global community of learning superstars today. So if you're not a member of the LPI, just head over to the lpi.org/membership, where you can find more details of how to become a member. So we are going to be joined by our expert panel. We're going to be joined by Peter Peter works at SJP as Head of Learning Performance and Innovation and is responsible for examining the impact of learning at a personal, team and organisational level. Peter works across the learning cycle, ensuring that measurement and evaluation is embedded from design, discussions, through to delivery, refinement and ultimately sustainable impact. In the 18 years prior to joining SJP, Peter worked as a business psychologist consulting with organisations on all matters assessment, selection and development. We're also going to be joined by Stephanie Johnson. Stephanie is the Manager of Consulting Delivery at Explorance. Stephanie is passionate about assisting and educating clients on the benefits of using people data for decision making and the value that that brings. Stephanie works with many clients on delivering learning measurement strategies which allow them to increase effectiveness, impact the overall business, as well as improve the employee experience. Prior to working at Explorance, Stephanie worked at BP, where she managed the global learning impact measurement strategy by coaching leaders and teams on how to improve the impact of their learning programs, and has worked to drive a measurement culture that used data to make decisions and simplified global reporting across multiple talent and learning platforms. So we're joined by a great panel today on such a great and important subject within L&D, as we know. So if you have just joined us, a very, very good afternoon to you. Lovely to have you with us. Just pop your name, where you're calling from, into the chat. Always lovely to hear where you're calling from. Laura's calling in from Nova Scotia in Canada. It's lovely to have you with us. Mike calling in from West Sussex, so not far from me. I'm calling in from East Sussex, so just a short hop away. Avril's just joined into the event now, calling in from Farnborough, so lovely to have you with us. And Paul's dialing in from Bristol, so lovely to have you with us. Matt's calling in from Leeds, Kirsten from Oxfordshire, Janet from Yorkshire, Amelia joining in from Barcelona. So lots of international L&D professionals calling in today as well. And Omkar calling in from India, also David from India. So lots of L&D professionals joining us today. Hi, Scott from Warwick, Heather from Birmingham, and Emily from Edinburgh. So before we do start, you can join the LPI and our panel of experts within L&D on the topics to upskill yourselves and share this with you in your organisations. Myself and my colleague Michael Strawbridge host events once or twice a week, and they are always free to attend. We will be starting at 1 o'clock, session duration today, 45 minutes, and the panel will be taking questions. So if you have any questions as we go through today's Learning Live digital event, just post those into the chat and our panel will get round to answering as many of those as they possibly can today. Our aim here at the LPI is to give you, our L&D community, the skills and the latest knowledge from industry experts on current subjects that are key to personal development and organisational capabilities. Every quarter, the LPI release the top 5 challenges that L&D are currently facing so that you can keep up with the latest trends and data at your fingertips. Our latest dashboard has just been released this week. If you just head over to the lpi.org, you will find those latest challenges that we all are currently facing. So don't feel alone there, where the LPI can help and assist on those current subjects that are hot right now within L&D. So again, just a few more minutes before I hand you over to Stephanie and Peter. And if you have just joined us, a very, very warm welcome. Marja calling in from Finland, lovely to have you with us. Emma from West Sussex, Exton from Pennsylvania, and William from Tampa. So some of our US colleagues calling in from for us today as well, and Harriet from Northampton. So lovely to have you with us. So just making it coming up to 1 o'clock. I'm sure you're going to take lots of knowledge, skill, expertise away from our expert panel today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Stephanie and Peter. Welcome to this Learning Live digital event.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, good to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks, everyone. I know that Scott's already done some introductions, but I'm Stephanie Johnson. I am the Manager of Consulting Delivery at Explorance, and I'm excited to be here with everyone today.
Yeah, great. And hello, everybody. My name's Peter Clarke. And yeah, as Scott mentioned, business psychologist by background, 18 years kind of working with assessment and development, mainly in that realm of psychometric tools and work with that. So helping, supporting, making decisions based on the use of data and information like that has always been kind of in my blood, and a real passion for me in that sort of way. So yeah, really happy to be here talking about it and what it is that we've been doing here at SJP.
Great, thanks, Peter. Hey, Scott, can you start the first poll for us?
I certainly can. Let me launch that for you. There we go, and you should have that on your screen right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're curious about everyone on the call today, and does your organization have a measurement strategy in place to measure the effectiveness of your learning programs?
I think fastest fingers first. There's lots of participant coming through right now. So I'm just going to leave that open just for another 5-6 seconds or so that we can get as many responses as we can and then be able to share those results on the screen with you. So we're just a few more seconds now, 72%. I'm sure we can get that up just a few more, and let me share those results with everybody. So let me share those, and I'll pop those onto the screen right now. They should be able to see the answers come up on your screen right now.
Wow, really interesting.
Yeah, so 60% of you without a good measurement strategy in place. So I think Peter and I hope that you'll hear our story today, get some ideas and insight, and you're always welcome to reach out to either of us, and we can discuss further about any questions you may have about that measurement strategy.
Yeah, and certainly for me, you know, a couple of years ago, we were in a very similar place. We had an idea about what it is that we want to do. We were really struggling about actually making this operational. So yeah, I can really appreciate and understand those people in that way.
Yeah, so Peter, that starts us right into our first question. So tell me about your journey. I know that, as you said, you started out without much of a strategy, and you've had a pretty big digital transformation here in the last couple of years. So what was happening back in 2020 at St. James's Place that really kicked off this journey for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a really, there was two things that really drove it. Clearly in 2020, COVID hit and happened. So there was a huge amount of change from, you know, the traditional ways that learning was managed and presented and delivered and all of those different parts to it. But we also underwent a kind of a real transformation in how we began to think about learning, particularly here at SJP. We asked a lot of questions of ourselves of, you know, what if we started really thinking about how people use technology, how people really begin to learn outside of the workplace. What is it that we could do to bring this in to the workplace and elements like that? So, you know, COVID was the real driver for it, but actually it really sort of chimed into a huge amount of things that we had. You know, it was really kind of getting into that bit of, you know, how is it that we can make learning accessible in a way it's consistent, really challenging, disrupting the traditional ways of learning, and that real desire, you know, particularly in the, you know, digital space, to get away from that, you know, the text and next approach to learning that was there, and thinking about, right, what is it that we can do? How is it that we can take that and work with it in that way? You know, a really good example of that would probably be around our, you know, a new approach to compliance and regulatory training. Financial services, highly regulated, a lot of compliance stuff that was there that people needed to do. And what we were hearing and what we were seeing is people getting pretty down and frustrated and irritated by the traditional ways of how that training was presented and delivered. So we began to shake it up and started looking at different ways of doing it, how people learn, how people think. But then really my whole area of focus then was, okay, so if we're going to do this, is it going to provide a different and a better experience to people? Is it going to have the understanding and then ultimately the impact, you know, that we're hoping and expecting to do? Because, you know, that really then gives us that basis and the judgment that we have around all of those sorts of things. So moving away from that more random acts of data collection, I think, into much more of a precise and a focused way of doing it, really. Yeah. And how about you, Stephanie? So, you know, that 2020 was a huge part of what was going on, and you know, really shook up organizations, and particularly the way that learning was done. You know, did you see some sort of differences about how learning measurement had pivoted at all?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because we've always had clients that were measuring virtual training, for example, and that's really what happened in 2020, as everybody knows. Everything kind of shut down face to face, and it all went virtual. And so for a lot of our clients, it was actually really easy because we'd already been surveying courses virtually. And so it was just kind of a flip of the switch in the system to say, well, let's send out the virtual surveys instead of sending out our face-to-face surveys. So in terms of collecting data, it was actually a pretty easy transition for most of our clients. And, they met that challenge. I think L&D was prepared to just quickly make everything virtual and did a great job at it. But we did have a lot of clients that were rethinking how they approached learning, just as you described. And I think one of the ways we saw was that a lot of training was opened up. So I think the feeling was lots of people have extra time now, so let's open up all the virtual training that we can. And so prerequisites were turned off. Everything was recorded, and it was just kind of anybody can take anything that they want to. So that was a big change and kind of opened up the audience, I think, for a lot of learning. In terms of data, it was actually quite interesting because what we actually saw, particularly in 2021, was that most of the virtual programs, did better than their face-to-face versions. And I think actually because you had to cut down like an 8-hour one-day training into a 4-hour or 3-hour virtual program. And so you got rid of all the fluff. And what we actually saw was all of our scrap learning metrics, which is the inverse of how much you can apply what you've learned to the job. All of that extra fluff was cut out. And so our scrap scores went really down. A lot of our metrics got really good in 2021. And we think a lot of it was because, you were trying to make things as succinct as possible. In 2022, we've seen scores start to kind of fade back to where they were before. So I think people have gotten tired of everything being virtual. They want things face to face. And now you're having to make the choice. Should we deliver this as ILT or as VILT? And what should we do? So we're starting to see those scores kind of creep back towards where they were pre-pandemic. But it was a really interesting trend that we saw during that time period.
It's interesting, isn't it? That whole distilling of training into actually really thinking closely about what is the most important elements to it all, and how is it that we deliver that has and shows the most and the biggest impact with it all, isn't it? So yeah, we certainly noticed that as well. Yeah,
it was very interesting. It wasn't something we expected to see, but sitting back, it made a lot of sense because you were having to cut out all the extra things and just make it relevant for people in the amount of time that they had. So actually, it's a great lesson learned for a lot of folks to see what happens. And the value of your training can actually go up when you're getting rid of some of that extra stuff that you may not need.
I agree. Really good.
Scott, are there any questions out there for us if we take a quick pause here?
Yeah, no, sure. No, there are no questions at the moment. So yeah, feel free to move on to the next part.
Yeah, can you move us on to the next poll? And I just realized I never shared my screen.
That's right. Let me
pop that.
There we go. You should have the poll number 2 up onto the screen now.
Perfect.
So poll number 2, in the last 12 months, are your key stakeholders more or less focused on learning data to demonstrate value? So answer there, more or less. We'll keep that poll open for another 10 seconds. Think about 75% of you have responded to the poll. So just leave that open just to get some great data so that we can share that with Peter and Stephanie. Okay, so most of our participants have completed the poll. So let me end the poll now and I'll share those details and share those results on the screen there with you. There we go.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So almost 80% of you are saying your stakeholders are more focused on learning data. That's great. And actually, I think that's a trend we're seeing a lot. We're hearing from a lot of folks that interest in data has gone up. Is that your thoughts as well, Peter?
Yeah, very much so. And I think, what's the drive behind that? What is it that, the stakeholders are most interested at doing? And, as the whole topic of this conversation is based, as, what's the story that our learning and our development is really sort of showing, not just from an investment point of view, but also, the changes that we're looking to do and to see, and actually, ultimately towards the business results as well. So yeah, it's all very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of told us about what was changing within your organization and where you guys were headed. And I know part of that was a journey to change that measurement strategy, right? You didn't want all of those random acts of data collection, we like to call them. You really wanted to start focusing on a new measurement strategy, a new approach, a new tool. So tell me about that. What did it look like? What were you looking for? What did you want to change?
Yeah, and it's an age-old problem, really, isn't it? Is that, quite often there was a little bit of intuition that people were noticing and sort of thinking about what works. I think this works, and this is a really good course and a really good program. But actually being able to look at that sort of stuff with it, for me, a huge amount was about that sort of standardization of, what it is that we're looking to measure, why it is that we're measuring it, streamlining it as well, so that we're not just asking question after question after question, getting low engagement from it all as well. So I guess, the process that we began to look at and to build was to start simple and build from there. So, first and foremost, what I was most interested and keen on looking at really is, the core components of what is it that makes effective training. So an element of the experience, how was the process of it, the technology and all that works and it adds value with it all. Was the content applicable and usable following the training? Was the trainer engaging and able to answer questions and do all of those sorts of really good things as well? But then ultimately, it's all about the motivation, the impact of any kind of change at a behavioral level, or skills level, and do people have the tools and the capabilities to take and transfer that learning and that training experience into the world and the workplace? So that was kind of all really about our foundations for starting from, and starting to think and to see where are the adjustments, where is it that we need to do that, build that whole process into the whole design phase with it all as well. Because the earlier we were able to build that whole principle and the ethics and the method around what it is that we're going to do at that design phase, it really helped focus what are the expectations that we're expecting to see as a result of this training or this piece of learning being delivered. So yeah.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And it's a great place to start and good questions to have. And I know eventually, you started looking for tools and you obviously found us at Explorance. What was it about our approach or our tool that really kind of convinced you this was the path to take?
Yeah, so I guess my headache was, okay, so we've got this, we're an organization of 2,000 centralized employees, a population of 11,000 partners that work across the whole of the SJP scope. So I really wanted to look at, okay, so how is it that we can do and create and get this measurement at scale, but also allow a huge amount of agility with what it is that we can do to dig into the information and data. And I had a great colleague with me, Tom Rolls, and my absolute fear is that somebody asked a question of us, proposed us with an exam question. My fear was that we'd lose Tom for 2 days, 3 days, while he went and scrambled around looking and trying to unpick all of the information and the details. So, first and foremost, it was moving away from that intuition part, but then able to dig into the information and data sort of quickly and with agility. So, things like being able to have the dashboards that we were able to go right down into the micro detail, but also then really keep a macro overview of it all as well. We've also got then really a lot of stakeholders that are interested and curious, the audiences that needed to get the information and all of those sorts of different things. So there was a huge headache of, okay, so, collecting data is one thing, making sense of it and then presenting it in a way that was usable, that allowed then decisions to be quickly made, was also sort of key. So I was really anxious and worried about becoming like an audit function, that you're just there look at the information after the event and the fact, and then be able to make decisions on it there. We wanted to have something with, you know, strong agility, that we were able to evolve and refine our projects and our learning and our programs along the way as well. So, you know, that was something that was really, really key and focus for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you came into this trying to get more organized data, and I know that, you know, you had a lot of change going on. So is there a specific program or example that you have that would kind of walk us through how you implemented your new measurement strategy or tool and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we'll both remember this till our parting days, I think, of, you know, so large part, biggest project that probably we had at the sort of middle of 2020 into 21 was, you know, our financial advisor academy. So in essence, it's a 12-week program that traditionally was a very technically skills heavy approach to it all. In essence, it's 160 discrete pieces of learning across this 12-week program. We've got cohorts starting every 2 weeks. And we did a real strong redesign and a revolution, really, of how that was presented, positioned, and delivered. So there was a real need to get into the information and get an understanding then of, you know, what was the differences, what is it we were seeing, and all of those. So we wanted a really quick and easy way of just be able to see, you know, what parts of the elements were working, what was providing the really good experience for our learners that they were able to use and to take away from it. But we also really wanted to get that sense then that we weren't making refinements or changes based on this intuition. So a really kind of good example of it was, at one point, the program had launched and it was underway. And then there was this feeling that we needed to do something with an element which focuses around telephone skills. And that came back into us, and we said, right, okay, we were able to quickly look into the detail in the data and say, no, actually, do you know what? This piece of information, this piece of training that's working perfectly. Everybody is saying it's having the good positive impact. Actually, as an element of training here, that's a really, really good focus for us to put our attention into an element of our redesign. So it was also, you know, really focusing into those sorts of parts. So being able to have that agility to work with information and data, then to inform the revision and the design process of it all was really, really key to us. Yeah, that's great. And with such a huge program, I mean, you know, over 12 weeks, cohorts starting all the time. How did you decide what you were measuring, or how, you know, what surveys you put where? What was kind of your thought process, right? Before it was random. So how was it helping you be a bit more strategic or more organized, if you will? Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the worst thing that we could have done was created evaluation or impact questionnaires based on the 160 discrete pieces of learning, because, you know, you get absolute evaluation fatigue and work with it. So we were able to look and to chunk pieces of learning together and say, right, okay, so this is a module, this is a section of stuff that you've done, you've undertaken. Now that has consolidated, and now that's sort of sitting and working with there, you know, how was the experience? Do you have the tools and the capabilities and the skills and the behaviors and the interpersonal skills now to put that into play once you leave the academy, rather than this feeling of, you know, we've delivered a huge amount of training to them, drowned them in information, and they have that feeling of falling off a cliff. So there was a real close analysis into all of those sorts of different things with it as well.
Yeah, that's great. And beyond the academy, how are you guys? Are you just measuring that academy? Have you started to kind of branch out into other areas around SJP? Are you widening that measurement plan?
Yeah, no, completely. So a huge amount of stuff that we did, and probably the most exciting for us really was, you know, the stuff around our compliance and our regulatory training. So we did a big shake up on the way that, you know, the ethic and the principle of how this stuff was delivered. You know, it's a scaling sort of project, so, you know, it goes across the whole of our population around it. So, you know, it's being able to look at that real-time information and real-time data as we're beginning to see, allowed us then to make those changes, those adjustments quickly and you know, with agility as we were going through it. So that was a kind of a real key part to us, was you know, doing it, starting to see and create and build that story of what it is that we're doing, seeing how it compares across different sections, because we've now got a standardized approach, and just being able to do it and look at it in that sort of way, really. Yeah. And for you, Stephanie, you know, I guess, you know, are your other clients sort of following similar pathways, similar things with that?
I'm going to say yes and no. So we have clients that come to us and say, we want to evaluate our entire portfolio, everything that's in our catalog, you know, big bang, let's do everything. We have some clients that come and say, I just want to try it out with one program. It is a pretty big implementation in terms of standardization. And so we do encourage folks to come with at least 5 programs. But we also have a mantra here of crawl, walk, run. So we want you to crawl before you walk, before you run. So all of that kind of fits in. Most folks, when they come to us, are really heavy on efficiency metrics. So I know how many people are attending my programs. I know how many hours it takes. I know how many programs I have, but none of that tells me how effective our learning programs are. So we focus on 3 big metrics, which is those efficiency metrics. You can't get rid of them. You still need to know all of those things, but we want you to start paying attention to effectiveness metrics and how effective your training is, because all of that together helps you get to your outcome metrics and what impact are you having on the business and what's that value. And those 3 aren't weighted equally. But metrics that matter as a tool, like you described, helps you really hone in on that effectiveness component, and then that allows you to tell that outcome story. We also have what we call a maturity curve, which is essentially a way for you to move up that curve as you start thinking about measurement. And rightly, as you described, Peter, most folks come to us kind of at the bottom of that curve with their random data, their intuition. They don't have standard surveys or standard processes. And our job is to help you move up that curve so that you have a seat at the table. You're not an order taker as L&D just creating a program. You're able to come back and say, here's the value and here's why I want to make changes. And you can kind of run training like a business, continually making improvements and actually showing the value versus just creating programs because somebody feels like training is going to solve the problem. A lot of the things you talked about are what help you move up that maturity curve. So starting with standardized surveys and standardized questions, moving to having different reports that you can give to different folks. You know, your course owners want to see something different than your instructors, who want to see something different than your executives. And so making sure that you're getting the right people to the right data to the right people lets you make some really good data-driven decisions. Scott, I want to check in with you in terms of any questions.
Sure. There are some questions coming. Emily's asked, do you have any tips for keeping consistency for new processes like this? So when you're implementing these programs, she feels sometimes the ideas and passion are good at the beginning, but it starts to fizzle out over time. How can we keep that sort of momentum up?
It's a really good question. It's a challenge and a battle that sort of we endured a little bit with it all as well. And probably another one was that, okay, can we ask this? We'd like to get this information. We'd also like to get this kind of information with it all as well. But you know, for us, it was about keeping that really tight, streamlined approach, almost challenging back of what's the expectation? Why are we asking this question? What is it that we're looking for? And you know, the kind of the exam question that we're looking to try and challenge with it all. And there was a lot of quite strong discussions at the sort of start with it, by, you know, saying no to a lot of those things, of the extra pieces of information that we think we could and should do. And for us, then it's then really allowed us to keep that consistency and can keep that longevity with it, because there is a track, there's a way that we're doing this, and this is the principle that we're doing, and we can now start seeing the difference of what, you know, people are doing, and you know, doing a bit of cross comparison across the different strategic streams as an example, or something like that.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, Peter, is leadership support. So I think what becomes really important as you're setting up a new process is to have that leadership to support, to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is going to become our new process, and we're going to build our culture around doing new things like this. So having that leadership support is key in order to keep anything that you're setting up new working over time.
Yeah, I agree.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got time for, before we move on to to the next section, from Heather. And she asked, do you have any advice about measuring impact for non-training based initiatives such as coaching or mentoring?
So actually, Stephanie and I are talking about this a lot at the minute, actually, because, you know, you're absolutely right, is, you know, things like coaching, things like leadership development as well, I think are so key. Such high investment elements to it all as well. So, you know, we're really beginning to focus in on, you know, beyond the experience, because, you know, coaching is great. Everybody in, you know, enjoys the benefits of coaching, but as a result of that, what is it that we're seeing from those things? You know, that's something that we're particularly focusing in on at the minute.
Yeah, and I think there's so much value in looking at the effectiveness of some of those non-formal training components as well, right? You can get feedback on things that are informal. As Peter said, we're talking about ways to start measuring some of their coaching and mentoring programs so that he can get feedback instead of that gut hunch feeling that, you know, coaching is great and everybody loves it. And again, 40 people signed up, so it must be doing well. So yeah, we're definitely able to measure those kinds of things. We're talking through the best strategies for him so that he can get that good feedback on how those programs are doing. So it's absolutely something that we're focused on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we could move on to the last part of your discussion. That would be great.
Perfect. Scott, do you want to pull up the last poll?
I will. Let me launch that now for you. There we go, just launched on the screen now. So the question is, what are your challenges sharing learning data with various key stakeholders? So just pop your answer there. They'll come up on the screen once everybody's had a chance to answer that one there.
We made it harder on you this time. We didn't give you choices, so I know you'll have to type your responses in.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably, you know, and the biggest learn that I've had for me in this particular area is, okay, so now how is it that you balance that data with the story? But yeah, be interesting.
So I'll leave it open for another 15 seconds as people have got to type. Got to start thinking about that. Pause and think. There has another question come in regarding the previous section, but I think we'll wait for that. It's a question from Mark Oliver, but we'll leave that to the end for your Q&A when we come to that part at the end. So I'm just going to close down the poll. Just going to give you another 5 seconds or so. And we've got about 40% that have put their answers in. So I'm just going to end the poll and share those results on screen. Okay, so some of those challenges. So I'm just going to read those out to you. So some of them are being able to get the data in the first place, don't know what they need or when they need it. Also, differentiating and interpretation of what constitutes return on investment. Does the data match with what they need to understand what the learning has done for them? There isn't many people who are chasing me for stats. There is no drive in my organization increasing learning engagement. Lack of consistency and lack of available data. too many other priorities for the leadership team to worry about the data coming in. Also, not the right measurements in place, not enough access to the data, or often they don't understand it or the relevance to them or how they could use it within their organization. And another couple here, sometimes they're not interested, or they just want us to finish working on a piece of work, an e-learning course, and move on regardless of its quality or its purpose to the organization. There's a couple of people that have actually said that into the chat here as well. And some stakers are just unclear as to what data they need and how they will utilize that within senior leadership teams, CEOs, etc. as well. And lots of other questions as well, having that availability of the data in the first place, where to collect it from, and are they collecting it from the right sources to be able to present that data back to SLT or the CEO.
Yeah, and I share a lot of those pain points as well. And it was just an interesting one that you mentioned, Scott, particularly around that return on investment element to it all. And hence why we've tried to really influence and be involved from the design process as well, because probably what we're looking at and what we've been shifting from a little bit is, instead of return on investment as such, it's a little bit into return on impact. Or anybody who follows Kevin Yates, he talks a lot about return on expectations. So as a result of you undertaking this piece of learning or this training, what is your expectation of change and difference in that? And for us, that's been a big shift into our area and our focus, which then therefore allows us to influence and impact ourselves in the design and the delivery parts of it all as well. So, you know, that's been a key one for us. But yeah, no, I get it.
Some great answers come in. So thank you for all our participants for sharing those challenges with you.
Yeah, those are all great challenges and ones I hear frequently. I know Peter has said he's dealt with a lot of those too, but you guys are not alone. There are a lot of clients out there that we have that come to us with those exact same problems. So I hope that we're giving you some of that information and helping give you some ideas today as Peter and I have been chatting. What I did want, let me move my slide here. I've not been good at doing that. Here we go. We're going to kind of shift to using that data to telling the story. So Peter, I'm curious, as you kind of got a standardized system in place, you've got a tool that allows you to get that data as you need it right away, much more organized. What's been the reaction from your different stakeholders within SJP now that you have data instead of intuition to help them manage their programs and continuously improve?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, as I kind of mentioned, it's achieving and striking that balance between, okay, we've got this great amount of information and data, and here you are, you know, you are very quickly, you know, found the hard way is that, you know, certain stakeholders and that are not interested. So for me, we've had to really focus in on, okay, so, you know, what's the exam question that we're looking to try and answer, and what's the story that we're able to present with that? And that for us has been how to work with and engage our stakeholders, work in that way. A really good example with that is as part of our academy program, we introduced virtual reality work that people were able to undertake and complete some simulations around, you know, client meetings and that. And then the initial reaction, perhaps, when we were positioning this was, okay, this is just a gimmick. This is just a novelty that you're going to introduce, but able then to start talking about the story around what was happening and what was going on beforehand, and then be able to show this is the experience that we're now giving, and people are able to do this at any time, any place, rather than a formal role play. And actually, as a result, they're able to experience what it's like when you get it right, what it's like when you get it wrong. And this is the impact that it then has for people's comfort and confidence and skills and capabilities and competence when they go out there. That was just an incredible story to be able to tell, and you know, formed a large part of the work that we had and what we've been doing and delivering and positioning for the rest of the organization as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of something you may add to one of your programs that you wouldn't really know. It would easily come back to that hunch of, well, this is just, you know, a headset. People love it or people hate it. And it's great that you actually had the data to show, well, here's what happened when we used it, and here's what we may have changed, because I feel like I heard stories from you as well about things that you did differently with that VR headset based on what you were learning from the data. So that's a great story.
Exactly.
I know that you guys recently applied to and won a couple of awards for your digital transformation strategy, and also for that academy program that you talked about. I was just curious how applying for this award, going through that process, gave you the opportunity to look back and tell your story, and did it help you realize that, you know, you had the data you needed? Were you missing some things? You know, how did you go about having the right information for that award?
No, absolutely. And this was the first year that we've really looked at awards as well, because, you know, again, we felt as if we were doing something great, but without the data to be able to think and to show the impact of what it is that we do, we just wouldn't have been able to do it. So actually the measurement, the data, the impact around it formed absolutely the core and the backbone to our submissions and and yeah, absolutely surprised, thrilled and delighted that you know, we were able to come along to the London LPI Awards and with that as well. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and I know you haven't been using metrics that matter for that long. And I know somebody was mentioning being able to show the ROI of training. So do you feel like, you know, with the amount of time that you had, you were able to show ROI, or do you think you had enough information with everything else that it was still sufficient? What's your thinking there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, now is the right time to collect it. You know, there's never, you know, it's always an important bit to start doing it, and I'll start doing it at the design phase again, because then that allows you to begin to tell that story, look at the understanding and the impact and the expectation. Have we been able to deliver against those expectations and the result with it? That whole story is what it is that makes the difference for us, and it certainly did for our position anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And I didn't realize this was the first year that you had even applied for awards. So that's even more exciting for you.
It is, yeah.
So the last question I have, Peter, is just what's next for you? So what are you guys focusing on? You kind of have this core measurement strategy in place for your academy, for some of your regulatory compliance programs. What's next in your journey?
Yeah, so, you know, we're really focusing into the elements, probably a little bit more of the intangible skills, the behavioral skills. So certainly a lot of stuff around leadership development. So, you know, an initial data that we're beginning to pick up and find is that people love the experience, having a great sort of time on leadership development. Probably what we're doing is we're filling the course with lots and lots of really good stuff. What they're not able to do and get is that understanding of how do I now take that back into my world of workplace. So we've been able to use that information and data to really reshape the design so that we're not just jam packing a program or a course or whatever with content. We're really able to do that. So we're expecting to see some really good results with that. I smiled wryly when I saw the question come up about coaching, because that's a huge part to us. Again, a huge investment for the organization, the business. So what are we seeing as a result of the expectation, the return on that expectation of that investment? So, you know, those two parts particularly are key and where it is that we're focusing in on.
Yeah, and those are relevant to many. Obviously, we already had the question about coaching, and I know that's something on your agenda. The leadership development part is great, and proving how folks can take what they've learned and apply it to their job is so important, because without that, you kind of miss that chain of evidence. You don't get to your return on expectation if it's say, yeah, I learned a whole lot, but I have no idea what to do with it when I get back into my role. So you have to make sure that your training is hitting that mark too, and that you're getting everybody the ability to apply. And that's going to change their behavior, change their performance, and improve their performance back on the job. So that's the key. Is not just our content is great, but I can apply it and it's actually going to improve my job performance, which is what all of your businesses want when you're creating that training in the first place.
Yep. And who is it that sees and is on the receiving end of that performance as well, I think is also the really good and the interesting part with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I
Very
think
good.
Scott, we'll hand it back to you. Any other questions that we want to cover here in the last few minutes?
Yeah, sure. There is a question coming from Christopher. I know, Peter, you spoke about introducing some tech like VR headsets, but Christopher's question was, did you have to introduce any other tech to get the detailed data that you needed to make you more aware of what was happening within the organization?
Not so much. No, we were agonizing over whether to use things like Power BI to start, looking and bringing into the different parts of the data and start making understanding around it. But actually, we found that the MTM dashboard and the system allowed a lot of that analysis and a lot of that approach to be done through their system and through their package. So, we mainly focused in on around that technology of using the MTM approach and through Explorance. Yeah.
Brilliant, perfect, thank you. And just to go back to, I know we were going to come back to Mark's question. I know you spoke about measuring, that impact of coaching and mentoring, but he said, I know it's linked to that previous question, but is there any sort of any other metrics you can take away of how to measure that data on the job or working with others?
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting one, isn't it?
It is. I think it's about trying to do it at scale. And so a lot of what we're encouraging clients like Peter to do is, get feedback right after somebody goes through a training course, so that you have that right away. How's it going? Our surveys are focused on future predictions too. So do you think you're going to be able to use this back on the job? But then we recommend sending out those follow-up surveys, especially for your strategic programs, because you can check in with those learners again, 60, 90, 120 days, whatever's relevant for that particular program, and say, now that you're back on the job, are you able to apply what you've learned? What challenges have you encountered? And that's great feedback, so that you can say, oh, it's not going as well as we thought, and here's some barriers that people are mentioning, so that we can try and fix those.
Yeah, and that's been a big learn for us as well, particularly with those follow-up surveys, to be able to kind of triangulate, the expected performance improvement. Okay, let's down the line, are we able to meet and see that continued and that sustained performance improvement? Because otherwise, again, if it just drops off the end of a cliff, then probably you're not being as efficient and precise as you should be.
Yeah, and some of those things are about what's happening back on the job. Maybe you're not having enough time to apply it, or your manager's not supportive. Manager support is so key to learning, and I don't know that everybody realizes how important having a supportive manager is to the application of what you learn in a program back on the job. And so that manager support can be key if you're seeing that big drop from what you expect to what happens. Sometimes it could be as simple as making sure your managers are reaching out and saying, what did you learn? And how can I help you apply that back in your role?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we've got time for one more question. It's going back to poll number 3, where we asked about their challenges. And I know, Peter, you mentioned was one of the questions about return on investment. Heather has a question. I know it's a big secret you can let out the bag, but are you able to share exactly how to measure ROI in L&D? Is there any specific formula that could be used to share your knowledge, skills, and expertise on this particular one?
Wow. is the response to that question, because it's so hard, it's so difficult to look at that, particularly that return on investment part with it. Yeah, it's a bit of a holy grail approach to it, I think. But yeah, we've certainly looked at a little bit of that return on impact or return on expectations rather than the investment part with it, because it's also the information, the data outside of our particular area that is always a challenge, and getting access and used to that data as well is the big challenge, and where a lot of my work is now focused in on as well.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a magic equation that we can put out there that's going to show you that ROI. And I actually think, from talking to most clients, when they say ROI, everybody's not always talking about the same thing. So as Peter mentioned, ROI for some folks can be return on impact. Maybe it's return on expectations. Maybe it's just showing we expected to see this kind of change from this program or this much application, or we wanted to see that everybody thinks this training is helping their productivity, and that could be a return on investment for them too. So the conversation we have with our clients usually is, let's figure out what return on investment means to you, and then let's help you, be able to show that. And generally we find not everybody's looking at the same thing, and every organization has a different way they want to show that return on investment. A lot of times it isn't what you expect in the financial world. It's not write down all the numbers and give me a dollar value. There's lots of other ways in the training world that you show return on investment.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And any closing comments, thoughts about today's Learning Live digital event?
It's really thought-provoking. Some of the questions that have come through has really helped position my thinking going forward with this as well. So I've learned a lot going through this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to everyone for joining
guys.
us and for answering our polls and participating and giving us questions. It was all very, very good.
Well, on behalf of myself, I just wanted to thank you both for your skill, expertise and knowledge on this subject. And I know everybody on today's call has really, really, taken something away, or that thought process, something to think about over the next couple of days. And with all of your storytelling, especially telling your story, Peter, thank you so much. And obviously Stephanie, with your expertise and skills in supporting SJP with this particular project as well. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, and also thank you to our participants that have really engaged. Lots of great questions coming in, and lots of thank yous for our expert panel for today's Learning Live digital event. So on behalf of the LPI, I'd just like to say thank you so much to Peter and Stephanie, and to all of our participants for joining in on today's session. I'd also just like to ask you to complete the short poll once you do exit the event today. This feedback will be shared with the associated parties to help make future improvements and suggestions for all Learning Live future networks. So on behalf of myself and the LPI, I'd just like to wish you all a very, very pleasant afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
So our next Learning Live digital event will be on the 16th of May in association with Ability, on how L&D teams win big, experiential learning for high potential and senior leaders. So again, a free event to attend in conversation with Alex Whiteleather, Jennifer Campbell and Dr. Lindsay Ray. So on behalf of myself, LPI again, wish you all a very, very pleasant afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.